let's jump right into it head first. Is this you, Mr. Solution?
Yes, it is. Hi, Debbie. How are you?
I'm grand. If I were any better, I'd be triplets.
There you go. There you go.
And how are you, sir?
Good, good. Excellent, excellent.
Good, I am too.
It should be an invigorating study, and Abraham has a lot on his plate.
We're on Genesis 17 or 18, sir?
18.
18.
Yeah, we're about to see Yahweh himself, along with the two angels, and Abraham is going to have a very, like I say, vigorous discussion in terms of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yes, they do.
all right, I'll stand by until you get set up. Yeah, and the thing is, and I try to bring this out as much as possible, we see real-life situations transpiring, and because human nature doesn't change, that's what makes the Bible so relevant. You can read virtually every issue or concern that we're having today. It was had in the Bible numerous times, by the way. So it's a phenomenal book that I think if one will extract from it, they can really get the benefit of this. And I think the audience will tonight, as they usually do.
We get great feedback. I know that. We're one of a kind on here. A lot of people are really raving about this and don't know. Some are like, I never knew anything about the Bible until I started listening to you, Debbie, on you and Mr. Solution on Sunday nights. That's how much people are getting out of this, Mr. Solution. They're even saying that they never really listened to the Bible, or they didn't really know that much about the Bible until they watched us. Listened to us, excuse me.
Right. Well, I suspected, along with the testimony that you had given, that we reach a unique audience, possibly people who would never, examine the Bible, or none of their friends would. But at least they see here pretty much an open, a transparent discussion. I mean, they can chime in at their leisure, or type in questions, whatever. So it's a real nice forum.
The Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. Abraham looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. He said, "If I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and then you may all wash your feet and rest under this tree. Let me get you something to eat, so you can be refreshed and then go on your way, now that you have come to your servant." "Very well," they answered. "Do as you say." So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. "Quick," he said, "get 3 seahs of the finest flour, and knead it, and bake some bread." Then he ran to the herd, and selected a choice tender calf, and gave it to a servant who hurried to prepare it. He then brought some curds and milk, and the calf that had been prepared, and set these before them. While they ate, he stood near them under a tree. "Where's your wife, Sarah?" they asked him. "There, in the tent," he said. Then one of them said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son." Now Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were already very old, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, "After I am worn out, and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure?" Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Will I really have a child now that I'm old?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah was afraid, so she lied and said, "I did not laugh." But he said, "Yes, you did laugh." When the men got up to leave, they looked down toward Sodom, and Abraham walked along with them to see them on their way. Then the Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all nations on earth will be blessed through him. For I have chosen him so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised him. Then the Lord said, The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin so grievous, that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know. The men turned away and went toward Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Then Abraham approached him and said, Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you really sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of the 50 righteous people in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. Far be it from you. Will not the judge of all the earth do right? The Lord said, If I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake. Then Abraham spoke up again, Now that I have been so bold as to speak to the Lord, though I am nothing but dust and ashes, what if the number of the righteous is 5 less than 50? Will you destroy the whole city for lack of 5 people? If I find 45 there, he said, I will not destroy it. Once again he spoke to him, What if only 40 are found there? He said, For the sake of 40, I will not do it. Then he said, May the Lord not be angry, but let me speak. What if only 30 can be found there? He answered, I will not do it if I find 30 there. Abraham said, Now that I've been so bold as to speak to the Lord, what if only 20 can be found there? He said, For the sake of 20 I will not destroy it. Then he said, May the Lord not be angry, but let me speak just once more. What if only 10 can be found there? He answered, For the sake of 10, I will not destroy it. When the Lord had finished speaking with Abraham, he left, and Abraham returned home.
We see here Abraham has 3 phenomenal visitors. These are, of course, angelic visitors, and one claims to be the Lord himself, because we see Lord in all caps, and that refers to Yahweh, the uncreated, the creator. And, that's the word that comes up in Exodus, where he says, I am that I am. So this is the man. This is the big guy here. And what happens here, Abraham recognized these esteemed guests immediately. In verse 2 it says, Abraham looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. So they did have the form or the visage or the appearance of men. And he says, when he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. So he showed great deference and, respect. And then he said, if I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, I pass your servant. So he's showing great hospitality. And we're going to see here, he entertains these people and he refreshes them. He says in verse 4, let a little water be brought, and then you may all wash your feet and rest under the tree. This is tremendous, because here we have these beings who obviously are transcendent. They're extraterrestrial, make no doubt about it. Their origin is not of the earth, but yet they've taken on a form of men, and they are, experiencing, the real experiences that men and women have. So their feet got dusty. They're walking in the desert. That's an arid land. And, of course, one of the things that they do in that area is the washing of the feet.
What the fuck?
Yeah, they're sitting under the shade of the tree, obviously, and they're resting. And then it says in verse 5, let me get you something to eat. And this is perfectly understandable. They've been traveling, so He's just showing hospitality so you can be refreshed and then go on your way now that you have come to your servant. And they say, very well, they answered, do as you say. So they accepted his gracious invitation. And we see here where Abraham ran and he told his wife, quick, he said, get 3 seers of the finest flour. He was giving them the best, and knead it and bake some bread. So they were there for quite a while. We see that. And then he ran to the herd, and he selected a choice tender calf and gave it to the servant, who hurriedly prepared it. He then brought some curds, milk, and the calf that had been prepared, and set these before them. While they ate, he stood near them under the tree. So we see they spent at minimum several hours for all of this to transpire. So they were there for quite a while. And we'll see where it points out that Abraham is a friend of God, and that's why God is sharing these things with him. God shared his intentions towards Sodom. Of course, he shared the intention and I'm just going to drop down. I'm going to come back to my place here in verse 9. But in verse 19, where this is the Lord speaking, and he says, for I have chosen, let me back up just a little bit. Verse 18, Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation. Now that's very, very significant. And just imagine that, someone telling anyone, you're going to become a powerful nation. And obviously, he has not seen that occur. But this is a promise that God is making. So God is very, very intimate with Abraham. And he says, and all nations on earth will be blessed through him. Now that is that's a huge blessing. All nations are going to come through Abraham. And we're going to see why, too. Abraham is considered the father of faith. And verse 19, and then I'll jump back to verse 9. He says here, for I have chosen him so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just. That's very important, what is right and what is just. So that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised him. So, one of the things that we're going to say here, and Abraham obviously is in the lineage of Christ, and a great discussion, you can read about it in John chapter 8, between the hierarchy, the Pharisees, and Jesus himself. But I think one of the most important points, or certainly an important point, is that God has prepared salvation, and all we have to do is express the faith. That's all Abraham really did. He trusted in God, and that's why he earned the badge or the title of the father of faith. That's very important to those that are saved. And, back in verse 9, we have here, Debbie, is there a question about this? Because it's hopefully that...
No, we're doing fine.
Okay, great. Verse 9, I'm just shifting back to verse 9. It says, this is the Lord asking Abraham these questions. Where is your wife Sarah? At least they ask. So all of them are in agreement. There in the tent, he said. Then one of them said, and obviously this is the Lord, I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son. So what God is saying is he's going to perform a miracle. Now, continuing on, it says, now Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent. So Sarah was listening to this conversation. She realized something big was going on, which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were already very old, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. Now, this is very significant to understand the purpose and the impact of the miracle. Okay, so she is past childbearing age, and they don't have artificial insemination and things that we have today, but yet God is going to perform this miracle. But we're being informed that Sarah was past her childbearing age. That's very important. Verse 12 says, so Sarah laughed to herself. You know how we do sometimes. We may hear something and we contradict it, but we just do it in private. She didn't do it publicly. So Sarah laughed to herself as she thought, after I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure? So in Jewish culture, a woman was considered, it was a great stigma for a woman to not be able to bear children. In fact, it was pretty much on the order of a curse. And, of course, Sarah and Abraham had been married a long time, and they didn't have any heirs. And we read about last time where Abram, before the name change, I believe, was lamenting at the fact that he didn't have an heir to pass on his substance. And, of course, God is going to remedy this. Verse 13 says, then the Lord said to Abraham, why did Sarah laugh and say, will I really have a child now that I'm old? So we see now, obviously God heard Sarah. Sarah didn't know this, and she was caught by surprise because she said it to herself. So God questions Abraham about what had happened. In verse 14, is anything too hard for the Lord? Now that's a standing question, and I'm going to say negative. No, nothing is too hard for the Lord. We may consider it too hard, but it's not. And he says, I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will. And that's, the definite future tense, not maybe, but she will have a son. And continuing on, verse 15, Sarah was afraid. See, once she was outed for her lack of faith, and she reasoned based on what she knew as a human being. I'm not faulting Sarah. Most of us would have come to the same conclusion. But it says in verse 15, Sarah was afraid. So she lied and said, I did not laugh. But he said, yes, you did laugh. So she is contradicted, and rightly so. And it says in verse 16, now we go to Abraham pleading for Sodom. And Abraham is acting as an intercessor. He's acting as an advocate for Sodom. Now, it's good to have an advocate, an able advocate, and to assist you, because a lot of us need help. So that's what Abraham is doing, and Sodom is in jeopardy of being destroyed. And you're going to see some extreme hyperbole, but don't miss the point here. God is actually, really transmitting some knowledge to us in this figure of speech here that we're going to see. It says, when the men got up to leave, they looked down towards Sodom. Now, we understand that's what they came for. They came for two things. Number one, to deliver the message to Abraham and Sarah that they were going to have a child, and also to check on Sodom. And it says, and Abraham walked along with them to see them on their way. And it says in verse 17, then the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Abraham will surely become a great and powerful nation, and all nations on earth will be blessed through him. For I have chosen him so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised him. So we see a juxtaposition here. We see a contrast. Now the Lord is talking about Abraham is to maintain what is just and right, or what is right and just, and God is about to look into the injustice and the unrighteousness that's going on in Sodom. And Sodom and Gomorrah, these are twin cities. We're going to see that Gomorrah is also mentioned, but we're mentioning Sodom now. And here comes the hyperbole that I was pointing out in verse 20. It says, "Then the Lord said," and this is the Lord saying this, "the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin is so grievous, that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me." Now think about that. And then he says, "If not, I will know." Now, obviously God knows, but what he's doing, remember we talked about this earlier on, he's using anthropomorphism. He's using our language to transfer a deep reality to us. That what Sodom, they had so lost their way, Sodom and Gomorrah, they're so sinful, they're so evil, they're so unrighteous. God is saying, I got a message. But even being omniscient, I'm going down and check this out, because this deserves to be checked out. Hopefully I'm transmitting this